Everything is perfect. You're laughing together, texting constantly, the chemistry is undeniable. They're telling you things they've never told anyone. You're making plans, you're falling, and then, without warning, they disappear. The texts get shorter, the calls stop. The person who couldn't get enough of you suddenly needs space. And according to attachment psychology, this isn't them being cruel or playing games. It's their nervous system screaming danger at the exact moment when love should feel safest. Stay with me, because what I'm about to explain will completely change how you see the person who pulled away from you, or why you keep doing it to people who care about you. Here's what nobody wants to admit. Pulling away when things get serious doesn't make you emotionally unavailable. It doesn't mean you don't care, and it definitely doesn't mean you're incapable of love. But there is something happening in your brain, something that was programmed years before this relationship ever started, that makes intimacy feel like a threat instead of a gift. And nearly 40% of adults have this wiring, though most of them have no idea why they keep sabotaging the exact thing they claim they want. Let's start with the question that torments everyone who's been on the receiving end of this. Why do people who seemed so into you suddenly act like you're a stranger? The answer is terrifying in its simplicity. They pull away because things are going well, not despite it, because of it. When someone has what psychologists call avoidant attachment, closeness doesn't register in their brain as safety, it registers as danger. Every deep conversation, every vulnerable moment, every time you get closer, their nervous system interprets it as a loss of control, and their brain does what it's been trained to do since childhood. It runs. But here's where it gets really interesting from a neurological perspective. This isn't a conscious decision. The person pulling away isn't sitting there thinking, things are great, time to ruin it. What's actually happening is their amygdala, the fear center of the brain, is activating the same way it would if they were being chased by a predator. Research on attachment and neuroscience shows that for people with avoidant patterns, emotional closeness triggers a genuine threat response. Their heart rate increases, cortisol floods their system. Their body is literally experiencing intimacy as a physical danger. So when they pull away, they're not being cold. They're trying to survive what their nervous system has misidentified as a threat. Think about it this way. Imagine you learned as a child that depending on people leads to pain. Maybe your parents were inconsistent. Maybe they punished you for needing them. Maybe they were physically there, but emotionally absent. Your developing brain learned a crucial survival lesson. Closeness equals hurt. Independence equals safety. That lesson gets hardwired into your nervous system. Fast forward 20 years, you meet someone incredible. Everything is going perfectly, and the moment it starts to feel like you might actually need them, every alarm in your system goes off. Not because this person is dangerous, but because needing anyone is what your brain learned to fear. And then there's the vulnerability paradox, which is genuinely fascinating from a psychological standpoint. People who pull away when things get serious often share incredibly personal things early on. They trauma dump on the second date. They tell you your deepest fears after knowing you for a week, and you think, wow, this person is so open, so emotionally available. But here's what's actually happening. Sharing painful stories from your past isn't the same as being vulnerable in the present. Talking about childhood wounds is safer than admitting you're scared right now in this moment of how much you're starting to care. Past vulnerability is controlled. It's a story you've told before. You know how people react. Present vulnerability is terrifying because you can't predict the outcome. So they share the past to create the illusion of intimacy while keeping their present feelings completely protected. Now, before everyone starts diagnosing their ex with attachment issues, there's another layer that most people miss. Sometimes pulling away isn't about fear of intimacy. It's about fear of self-erasure. People who've lost themselves in past relationships, who've abandoned their identity to make someone else happy, who've been consumed by another person's needs, they learn that serious relationships equal disappearing. So when things start getting real, when they feel themselves starting to prioritize you over their own needs, their brain hits the emergency brake. Not because they don't love you, but because the last time they loved someone this much, they stopped being themselves. But here's the part that explains so much about why this pattern is so painful for everyone involved. The person pulling away is often just as confused as you are. They genuinely don't understand why they're doing it. They want connection. They're lonely. They started this relationship hoping it would be different, and then the familiar pattern kicks in and they watch themselves destroy something good while feeling completely powerless to stop it. And let's talk about the autonomy obsession, because that's where things get really complicated. People who pull away when things get serious often have an intense need for independence. Not the healthy kind where you have your own interests and friendships. The kind where needing anyone for anything feels like weakness. Where asking for support feels like failure. Where being chosen by someone makes them immediately want to prove they don't need to be chosen. It's not about you. It's about a deeply ingrained belief that dependence is dangerous and self-sufficiency is the only safe way to exist in the world. But here's what's really interesting. The things that trigger the pull away are usually the things that signal the relationship is getting real. Meeting the family, saying I love you, making future plans, moving in together, having a key to each other's place. These milestones that most people see as positive progression, people with this pattern experience as trap doors closing. Each one represents another way they could get hurt, another area where they're becoming dependent, another piece of control they're giving up. So they sabotage it before it can go further, convincing themselves they're protecting something, when what they're really protecting is the illusion that they don't need anyone. Now, let's be clear about something else. Sometimes people pull away because they genuinely aren't that interested and they're using emotional unavailability as an excuse. But if someone is showing you through their actions, not just their words, that they care, if they keep coming back even after pulling away, if they're genuinely distressed by their own behavior, that's different. That's not someone playing games. That's someone whose attachment system is at war with their desire for connection. And that distinction matters. Here's the part that offers some hope, though. Awareness is the first step toward change. When someone understands that their pull-away response is an outdated protection mechanism, not an accurate assessment of present danger, they can start to override it. It requires therapy, conscious effort, and usually a partner who can provide consistency without chasing. But it's possible. The nervous system can learn new patterns. The intimacy threshold can expand. The brain can be retrained to see closeness as safety instead of threat. So what does all this mean? If you pull away when things get serious, you're not broken beyond repair. You're someone whose nervous system learned to protect you in a way that made sense once but doesn't serve you anymore. Your fear of intimacy isn't a character flaw. It's a survival strategy that's outlived its usefulness. And if you're on the receiving end of someone pulling away, it's not about your worth. It's about their capacity for closeness, which was shaped long before they ever met you. The next time you feel the urge to run when someone gets too close, or you watch someone you care about disappear right when things were going well, remember this. You're not witnessing someone who doesn't care. You're witnessing a nervous system trying to protect someone from a danger that doesn't exist anymore. And the only way through it is to stay long enough to prove to that terrified system that this time, intimacy won't end in pain. If this resonated with you, you need to understand why some people can't accept compliments from their partner and how this reveals the same core wound that makes closeness feel impossible. Click to discover why deflecting love might be your last line of defense against getting hurt.